The death of Gloria Ramirez, the toxic lady. Have you ever wondered how dangerous the air you breathe can become? How quickly safety can vanish, replaced by invisible horrors that invade, infect, and destroy from within. In 1994, Riverside, California, became ground zero for a terrifying, unexplained phenomenon, one rooted deeply in reality yet veiled in chilling mystery. Gloria Ramirez, a woman whose name would soon be whispered in fear as the toxic lady, was rushed into Riverside General Hospital. What followed was inexplicable. Doctors collapsed, nurses fainted, and an invisible menace began to spread through the sterile halls. This is not just another frightening tale. This is a real story of medical terror, contagion, and supernatural dread. Hold your breath as we delve into the dark corridors of an unsolved horror that turned caregivers into victims, because some mysteries are better left unsolved. Chapter 1. Code Blue. Gloria Ramirez arrived at Riverside General Hospital at 8:15 p.m., rushed in by frantic paramedics who could barely comprehend the rapid deterioration of her condition. Her heart raced, and her breathing was labored. Nurses and doctors crowded the emergency room, their movements swift yet deliberate, each action desperately aimed at stabilizing her fading vitals. Yet, as medical staff fought to save Gloria, something inexplicable began to occur. Nurses attending her noted an unusual, oily sheen covering her skin. A strange fruity odor, reminiscent of garlic and ammonia, began to permeate the room. Initially dismissed as inconsequential, the scent quickly turned nauseating, gripping everyone. In a growing sense of dread, suddenly, one nurse staggered back, her eyes widening in panic. "I feel dizzy," she murmured, collapsing to the floor. Another followed moments later, clutching his chest as if an unseen force gripped his heart. Doctors exchanged confused and fearful glances as they realized the threat wasn't merely contained within Gloria's fragile body, it was spilling into the air, invisible yet deadly. "Code Blue," shouted a panicked voice, echoing down the sterile corridors. But by then, the invisible menace had already begun its relentless, silent assault. The emergency room quickly descended into chaos. Alarms blared relentlessly, lights flickered erratically, casting eerie shadows that danced ominously on the walls. Medical personnel scrambled, desperately donning masks and protective gear, hoping in vain to shield themselves from whatever unseen threat permeated the air. Doctors shouted orders that went unheeded, drowned out by the confusion and rising terror. Nurses moved as if underwater, their bodies sluggish and unresponsive. The once orderly and professional environment had become a nightmarish tableau of dread and desperation. Paramedics stood frozen, unable to understand or even process the horrors unfolding around them. Each breath they took seemed tainted, filled with an invisible, insidious toxin. As more medical staff succumbed, dropping to the floor with haunting suddenness, the few remaining upright felt their panic rise exponentially. "Get everyone out!" screamed Dr. Matthews, the senior physician on duty, his voice tinged with raw fear. "This place is contaminated." But it was too late. The invisible threat had already claimed its first victims, and the night was far from over. Dr. Matthews struggled to remain conscious, his vision blurry and his mind racing. Flashbacks of his medical training blurred together with the surreal horror unfolding before him. He had witnessed trauma, chaos, even death, but nothing prepared him for the sheer incomprehensible terror gripping Riverside General Hospital that night. Beside him, another nurse convulsed weakly, her body shaking uncontrollably. Matthews instinctively reached out, but the nurse's eyes stared unseeingly toward the ceiling, her breaths shallow and uneven. Desperation filled him as he realized he could do nothing to ease her suffering. Around them, more staff members fell, victim to the unseen threat, their cries of panic and pain merging into a dissonant symphony of despair. A pair of paramedics emerged from a side corridor, their faces pale, eyes wide with shock. One stumbled forward, clutching the wall for support, barely managing to whisper, "It's everywhere. The air, you can't escape it." His colleague collapsed, dropping an oxygen mask that rolled ominously across the polished tile, coming to rest. Beside Matthews's feet, the hazmat team continued their work with grim determination, moving swiftly to isolate victims and erect containment tents in a futile attempt to halt the spread of contamination. But the unseen toxins seemed to defy logic, passing effortlessly through protective gear and sterile barriers. Fearful whispers filled the corridors, speculating about chemical warfare, bioterrorism, and even supernatural explanations. Get away from me," gasped a technician, pulling weakly at his mask as his skin grew clammy and pale. Another orderly collapsed nearby, her gloved hand spasmodically twitching on the floor. The symptoms varied yet shared a terrifying pattern: dizziness, nausea, chest pains, and a rapid, overwhelming collapse. Outside, emergency vehicles converged upon the hospital, lights flashing, sirens wailing, a stark contrast to the eerie quiet descending within. Authorities struggled to coordinate their response, the unusual nature of the crisis quickly overwhelming established protocols. Police officers cordoned off surrounding streets, barricades swiftly erected to keep terrified onlookers at bay. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, nurses and doctors still standing tried desperately to help their fallen colleagues. A few heroic staff members, barely functional themselves, dragged unconscious co-workers toward the exits, driven by sheer instinct and camaraderie. Yet with every breath they felt their strength wane, the oppressive atmosphere sapping their energy and resolve. Dr. Matthews, now barely conscious, propped himself weakly against a reception desk, attempting to survey the scene. Through blurred vision, he glimpsed Gloria Ramirez lying motionless on the stretcher, her body eerily still amidst the chaos surrounding her. The oily sheen on her skin seemed to shimmer grotesquely under the fluorescent lights, giving her a ghostly, unnatural appearance. A technician knelt by Gloria's side, collecting samples with trembling hands. Even through protective gloves, he hesitated, sensing something profoundly wrong about the woman on the stretcher. What is this?" he muttered, staring at the syringe filled with oddly colored fluid drawn from her veins. His eyes widened in terror as he realized the liquid emitted a faint phosphorescent glow. "Step away," shouted one of the hazmat responders urgently, noticing the technician's frozen state. But it was already too late. The technician collapsed instantly, his body convulsing violently, sending the glowing vial crashing onto the floor. The liquid splattered, pooling ominously, spreading its eerie luminescence outward. Matthews watched helplessly as the glowing substance seeped along cracks and crevices, reaching toward fallen staff members like tendrils of some malevolent organism. His heart thundered in his chest, his breathing ragged and uneven. The room grew colder, darker, as if some unnatural presence had taken hold of the very environment. As Matthews's vision dimmed further, a whisper returned, more distinct this time, closer, wrapping around him with suffocating clarity. "You cannot escape us. We are inside you already," the voice hissed, resonating with an unsettling chorus of overlapping whispers. His body trembling uncontrollably, Matthews struggled to summon his final reserves of strength. He crawled toward the emergency exit, each agonizing movement feeling like a monumental task. His mind screamed for escape, yet a dark, foreboding certainty gnawed at his fading consciousness. Whatever horror had been unleashed here, it was only just beginning. He reached out toward the glowing exit sign above the door, now blurred and distorted through the tears streaming down his face. "Please," he gasped weakly, "help us." The darkness finally overtook him completely, plunging Matthews into oblivion, leaving the emergency room eerily quiet, the air thick with dread and the whispered promise of horrors yet to come. Chapter 2: Invisible Poison. The silence inside the emergency room did not last long. Soon, the muffled shuffle of hazmat suits filled the space, accompanied by quiet, fearful murmurs. Specialists from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) arrived swiftly, their presence bringing both reassurance and a deeper, unsettling fear. Agent Sarah Collins, a veteran investigator with experience in biohazard containment, stepped through the hospital doors, her heart heavy with dread. Even behind layers of protective gear, she sensed the oppressive nature of the threat immediately. Her eyes scanned the chaos, medical instruments scattered haphazardly, 4 stands overturned, bodies sprawled across the floor in unnatural positions. It was a scene from her worst nightmares. Initial assessment. She demanded from a nearby technician who was hastily setting up containment equipment. "Unknown pathogen," the technician replied, his voice shaking despite his attempts to maintain professionalism. "Nothing we've encountered before. Spreading airborne, apparently unstoppable." Collins felt a chill run down her spine. "Have we established patient zero?" "Gloria Ramirez," the technician replied, nodding toward the still figure on the stretcher. She was the first to arrive. Symptoms included heart irregularities, respiratory distress, and the strange odor. "We have initial reports of something peculiar about her blood." "Peculiar how?" Collins questioned, her attention focused sharply. "It emitted a faint glow," the technician admitted quietly, his voice trembling slightly. "Anyone who interacted directly with her or her fluids became symptomatic almost immediately." Collins took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. She signaled to her team, instructing them to begin sample collection and secure the scene meticulously. "We need to isolate everyone exposed, establish perimeters, and find out what exactly we're dealing with." Teams moved methodically, but uncertainty tainted every action. With every passing minute, the unseen poison appeared to defy traditional containment measures, permeating protective gear with terrifying ease. Personnel continued collapsing, reinforcing the pervasive fear among responders. Outside, news crews had already gathered, pressing against hastily erected barricades, cameras capturing every frantic movement. Rumors and speculations surged through the crowd, amplifying the sense of panic and helplessness. Inside, Collins struggled to control her mounting anxiety. Never had she encountered a threat so insidious, so completely invisible, yet devastatingly effective. She watched helplessly as another member of her own team staggered slightly, pausing to steady himself before continuing his duties with grim determination. Collins approached Gloria's body cautiously, examining her through the reflective visor of her protective gear. Gloria appeared peaceful, deceptively so, given the chaos surrounding her. Collins's mind raced. What could transform a routine medical emergency into an unprecedented catastrophe? "Agent Collins." A voice broke her thoughts, urgent and filled with alarm. She turned sharply to see another technician pointing frantically at a nearby monitor. "You need to see this." Rushing to his side, she watched the screen in disbelief. The air samples they had collected showed a rapidly mutating airborne pathogen unlike anything documented. It shifted forms, defying scientific understanding. Collins's stomach turned as the implication became clear. This wasn't just a medical anomaly, it was something far more malevolent and far less explainable. "Increase containment immediately," Collins ordered, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her resolve. "We have to assume this thing will spread rapidly if we don't contain it now." As her team scrambled to comply, Collins felt the first twinges of dizziness creep over her. Her breath caught in her throat, her heart raced unevenly, panic gripping her chest with mounting dread. She understood that the invisible poison was already inside her. She gritted her teeth, forcing her body to remain upright through sheer willpower. This was now a race against time, a desperate battle to understand the invisible terror and stop it before it claimed countless more lives. Find the source, Collins gasped, clutching the edge of a medical trolley for support determination. Fueling her weakening body, find it before it's too late. The unseen menace had struck, and no one knew how far its reach would extend or who would be its next victim. As Agent Collins clung desperately to the trolley, her vision blurred, edges darkening. She fought the growing sensation of nausea and disorientation that threatened to consume her entirely. A cold sweat broke out beneath her protective suit, chilling her skin despite the insulated layers. Nearby, another CDC agent, Agent Marcus Reed, noticed Collins struggling and quickly moved to assist her. "Collins, hold on. We've got to get you out of here," he urged, grabbing her arm firmly and guiding her toward the containment exit. His voice was steady, but the worry behind his eyes was unmistakable. "I'm fine," Collins insisted weakly, trying to shrug off his grip, but her legs betrayed her, trembling uncontrollably with every step. "We need answers. Now more than ever." Reed ignored her protests, half carrying her out of the contaminated zone into a makeshift decontamination chamber set up in an adjacent corridor. Inside, other responders were already undergoing rigorous decontamination procedures, their expressions hollow and haunted. Medical personnel rushed to Collins, removing her protective gear with practiced urgency. As the mask lifted, she inhaled deeply, the air tasting unnaturally sterile but clearer. Still, the dizziness persisted, lingering ominously at the edge of her consciousness. "Vital signs are erratic," reported a medic, glancing at the monitoring equipment attached hastily to Collins. "Symptoms consistent with others: rapid heart rate, dizziness, and acute respiratory distress." Collins, despite her weakening state, refused to succumb completely. "Test my blood immediately," she instructed hoarsely. "We need every clue possible." The medic quickly drew blood samples, placing them carefully into secure containers, visibly nervous despite his professional composure. Collins watched as her blood swirled within the vials, relief and dread intertwined within her mind. Could she herself become the key to unraveling this terrifying mystery? Outside, the chaos intensified. Authorities expanded the quarantine zone, evacuating nearby buildings and residences. News helicopters circled overhead, their lights cutting sharply through the night sky, turning Riverside General Hospital into an eerie beacon of crisis. Inside the decontamination chamber, Collins glanced at her fellow victims, doctors, nurses, technicians, all battling the unseen threat. Each face reflected the same mix of confusion, fear, and desperation. She couldn't help but wonder how many would survive this nightmare. Agent Reed approached her cautiously, his expression grave. "The lab analysis of initial samples is underway. They're detecting substances that shouldn't be biologically possible." Collins looked up at him sharply. "Explain." Reed hesitated, swallowing visibly. "The substance found in Gloria Ramirez's blood, and now in yours, appears to mutate on a molecular level rapidly. It defies all known biological principles. There's no precedent, no logical scientific explanation. Are we talking biological weaponry?" Collins asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her attempt to remain composed. Reed shook his head slowly, his expression growing even graver. "No known bioweapon behaves like this. It's almost as if it's adapting, evolving faster than we can analyze." Collins felt an icy dread settle in her stomach. The implications were staggering. If this unseen poison truly defied all scientific understanding, then perhaps it wasn't merely biological, it could be something entirely unnatural. Then we need help beyond conventional methods, she murmured quietly, determination strengthening her voice. We have to find another way. Reed nodded solemnly, realizing she was right. This invisible poison had transcended their worst expectations, pushing them into uncharted territory. Conventional science had failed them. Now they had no choice but to see cancers in places they'd never imagined, and as Collins's vision darkened again, she knew their fight had only just begun and the stakes had never been higher. Chapter 3: Quarantine. Dawn broke slowly over Riverside, casting an eerie, pale glow upon the hospital's sprawling complex. Barricades and roadblocks stretch outwards, manned by tense law enforcement officers and military personnel. The once bustling city area surrounding Riverside General had become a ghost town, its streets deserted, its buildings empty and silent within the perimeter. The CDC and emergency responders worked tirelessly, erecting field hospitals and containment facilities. Medical tents dotted the hospital parking lot, housing victims displaying varying degrees of symptoms. Harsh floodlights illuminated the grim scene, casting stark, unnatural shadows. Inside one of the central command tents, a makeshift command center buzzed with urgency. Communication equipment crackled with constant updates. Medical personnel huddled around screens displaying baffling lab results, and tense meetings took place continuously. Agent Marcus Reed stood over a table covered in hastily scribbled notes and diagrams, his expression drawn and weary. We must determine the exact mode of transmission, he addressed the team gathered around him. Airborne precautions have proven ineffective. There must be something else we're missing. What about direct contact? Suggested Dr. Elaine Foster, an epidemiologist who had just arrived from CDC headquarters. Perhaps it's initially airborne but amplifies upon direct exposure to bodily fluids. Reed considered her theory carefully, nodding slowly. That aligns with some observations. All initial severe cases interacted directly with Gloria Ramirez or her fluids. A sudden commotion interrupted their discussion. Shouts erupted outside the tent, accompanied by a piercing alarm. Reed dashed outside too. Witness a harrowing sight. A patient had broken quarantine, stumbling wildly toward the perimeter. Guards approached cautiously, weapons raised but hesitant. Please, help me. The patient screamed, his voice ragged with terror. Blood dripped from his nose and mouth, staining his hospital gown. It's inside me, I can feel it. Stay back, Reed shouted, stepping forward with his hands raised defensively. You're putting everyone at risk. But the patient, eyes wild and unseeing, lunged forward desperately. Before anyone could react, gunfire echoed, piercing the morning air. The patient collapsed instantly, silence descending once more. Reed stood frozen, heart pounding, realizing the gravity of the moment. The quarantine was failing, panic was escalating, and whatever had been unleashed inside Riverside General was determined to spread beyond its walls. He turned back toward the command tent, a new resolve hardening his expression. We must secure this perimeter at all costs. No one leaves, no one enters. Containment must hold until we have answers. His words were met with solemn nods, yet each face reflected the same unspoken fear. Could anything truly stop an invisible menace that defied comprehension? As the sun rose higher, bathing the quarantined hospital in stark daylight, Agent Reed knew they faced a terrifying reality. The quarantine was no longer merely about containing a medical crisis, it was about preventing the beginning of something much darker, something that could consume them all if left unchecked. Agent Reed quickly returned to the Central Command tent, his movements decisive but burdened by the chaos he'd just witnessed. He gathered the team around, their faces etched with anxiety and exhaustion. Double-check everyone's protective equipment immediately, he ordered. Ensure no breaches, no compromises. We can't afford any mistakes now. Personnel scrambled too. Follow his directives, meticulously inspecting suits, masks, and gloves. Meanwhile, Dr. Foster approached Reed cautiously, her eyes filled with deep concern. We need to consider broader evacuation protocols, she advised quietly, glancing around at the bustling activity. If this pathogen escapes containment, the consequences could be catastrophic. Reed sighed heavily, running a hand through his damp hair. Evacuation isn't viable yet. Moving people now might spread this thing even faster. We need concrete data first, something that tells us exactly how this is spreading. Dr. Foster nodded grimly, understanding his hesitation. Then we must expedite the analysis. I've already authorized priority processing at the CDC lab. Just then, another alarm rang sharply, jolting everyone into tense silence. A hazmat-suited figure rushed inside the tent, breathless. We have another breach near the eastern perimeter. Multiple patients are showing severe symptoms, rapid deterioration. Reed felt his stomach tighten. Get additional security there immediately. Lock it down. He sprinted toward the eastern section, flanked by a small squad of heavily equipped personnel. The scene that greeted them was chilling. Patients and staff, clearly suffering, pressed against the quarantine barriers, pleading and desperate. Some had collapsed to the ground, their bodies contorting grotesquely as the mysterious poison ravaged their systems. Hold the line, Reed shouted firmly. No one crosses, not even medical personnel. He watched helplessly as fear and confusion spread among the quarantined individuals. Their anguished cries echoed painfully in his ears, but he forced himself to remain steadfast. Compassion battled fiercely with practicality in his mind, but he knew breaking protocol now could doom countless others. Slowly, painfully, the immediate chaos subsided, replaced by quiet sobs and low murmurs. Reed turned away, heart heavy with guilt and frustration. Each decision weighed heavily upon him, and the realization grew clearer that this crisis was spiraling beyond their control. Returning to the command tent, Reed found Dr. Foster hunched over newly arrived data, her expression deeply troubled. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "You need to see this." Reed moved quickly to her side, peering at the lab report displayed on the screen. His blood ran cold. The pathogen wasn't just mutating, it appeared sentient, altering its structure actively to evade detection and containment. "It's adapting," Dr. Foster said quietly, voicing what they both feared. "It's learning." Reed stood frozen, struggling to process the implications. If the invisible menace was evolving intelligently, it wasn't merely a medical crisis, it was a threat unlike anything humanity had faced before. His voice trembling, he addressed the team once more, conviction warring with dread. "We must find its weakness fast. This is no longer just containment. It's a fight for survival." Chapter 4: Symptoms of the Unknown. The Riverside General Hospital was no longer recognizable. What had once been a beacon of hope and healing had transformed into a fortress of fear. Inside its barricaded perimeter, medical professionals and emergency personnel struggled against an adversary they neither understood nor could visibly detect. The unknown pathogen had thrust everyone involved into a waking nightmare. In one of the makeshift medical tents, Dr. Elaine Foster meticulously studied patient charts and symptom logs. She paced anxiously, noting the disturbing patterns that defied medical logic. Patients were exhibiting symptoms that, while superficially similar, were individually varied enough to defy easy classification. Dr. Foster, a young medical technician, called from the entrance, his voice urgent yet tentative. "You should come see this." Foster quickly followed him to a tent housing several critically ill patients. Upon entry, she halted abruptly, momentarily, frozen by the surreal scene before her. Patients who had been previously comatose now exhibited symptoms of extreme distress. Limbs trembled uncontrollably, eyes rolled wildly, and low, guttural moans filled the space with haunting regularity. "This isn't just physiological," Foster murmured, her heart racing with dread. "It looks neurological, perhaps something attacking their nervous systems directly." She approached one patient, a nurse named Patricia whom she'd known personally. Patricia's eyes fluttered open as Foster drew near, their gaze unfocused yet filled with unmistakable terror. "It's inside me," Patricia gasped weakly, her voice barely audible. "I feel it crawling under my skin," whispering. Foster felt a chill run through her, fighting to maintain professional detachment. "Patricia, what are you hearing?" The nurse's gaze suddenly snapped into sharp clarity, locking onto Foster with startling intensity. "Voices," she whispered urgently. Tears streaming down her cheeks, "they speak to me. Tell me things. Horrible things." Foster recoiled slightly, her breath hitching. Could hallucinations or psychological effects be another dimension of this mysterious illness? She quickly noted the symptoms, forcing herself to remain composed despite the rising panic. Throughout the tent, other patients echoed similar complaints, voices, whispers, feelings of something alien moving beneath their skin. It was as though the pathogen wasn't merely attacking bodies but invading minds, reshaping reality itself into something horrifyingly new. Meanwhile, Agent Marcus Reed had begun receiving alarming reports from other quarantine zones around the hospital. Similar symptoms had emerged simultaneously, as if coordinated by some unseen force. The invisible menace had rapidly expanded beyond initial exposure points, systematically undermining containment efforts. "We're dealing with something unprecedented," Reed muttered, addressing the medical and emergency personnel gathered around him. "Standard procedures aren't working. We need to consider every possibility, no matter how improbable." A senior CDC scientist, Dr. Anton Greer, stepped forward, his demeanor calm yet his eyes shadowed by deep concern. "We have to accept that conventional medical paradigms no longer apply here. What we're facing might not even be a pathogen in the traditional sense. Then what is it?" Reed asked sharply, desperation edging into his voice. Greer hesitated clearly. "Uncomfortable. I believe we're dealing with something extraordinary, perhaps even paranormal." His statement hung heavily in the air, the implications deeply unsettling to everyone present. They had entered uncharted territory where science, logic, and rational explanations gave way to something darker, something inexplicable. Reed took a deep breath, steadying himself. "If that's the case, we need expertise beyond medical science. We must find someone who can help us understand what we're facing before it's too late." The team nodded gravely, each silently acknowledging the harrowing truth that their battle had moved beyond the realm of known science into an unfathomable darkness. And as symptoms continued to worsen, the invisible enemy tightened its grip, promising only more terror to come. Dr. Foster worked tirelessly, driven by the urgency of the deteriorating conditions around her. Each patient's symptoms became increasingly bizarre and alarming, defying logical medical explanations. She documented cases meticulously, noticing disturbing similarities, a gradual cognitive breakdown, followed by acute paranoia and vivid hallucinations. The progression terrified her, especially as the whispers of affected patients grew increasingly coherent yet horrifyingly cryptic. In a secluded corner of the medical tent, Foster studied blood samples under a microscope, the slide illuminated by harsh artificial light. What she observed made her recoil in shock. The pathogen wasn't merely infecting blood cells, it appeared to merge seamlessly with them, creating a grotesque hybrid of human cells and something entirely alien. Impossible, she whispered to herself, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microscope for a clearer view. Each adjustment reinforced her terrifying suspicion. The organism behaved intelligently, evading detection, adapting with alarming speed. It was like nothing known to medical science. Dr. Foster called Agent Reed urgently, interrupting her chilling revelation. "You need to see this immediately." She followed him to a security monitor displaying surveillance footage from the quarantine perimeter. Patients who had appeared lethargic and immobile moments earlier now exhibited violent, uncontrollable behaviors. They lunged at barriers, striking them repeatedly with shocking strength. "What's happening to them?" Foster asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Reed replied, visibly shaken. "But whatever this thing is, it's driving them mad. We must contain this, or we risk losing control entirely." Foster watched helplessly as the frenzied patients continued their assault on containment barriers, their faces twisted into masks of rage and desperation. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple medical crisis. It was rapidly becoming an unimaginable nightmare. Reed urgently activated his radio, communicating rapidly with the security teams deployed around the perimeter. "Reinforce the eastern barriers immediately. Prepare for sedation if necessary, but do not breach containment under any circumstances." Static crackled briefly before acknowledgement came through, yet his confidence remained shaky. Each passing moment tested their fragile sense of control. As if the invisible enemy sensed their fear and intensified its assault accordingly, Dr. Foster returned swiftly to her makeshift laboratory, driven by an overwhelming urgency. Her mind raced, haunted by Patricia's terror-filled eyes and the surreal violence unfolding outside. She prepared new slides, examining more blood samples from various patients. Each revealed the same horrifying behavior, the hybrid organism rapidly replicating, adapting, and integrating with host cells. Then Foster noticed something even stranger. Under closer scrutiny, she saw subtle pulses, almost rhythmic contractions, as if the infected cells communicated, coordinated, or responded collectively to external stimuli. "It's communicating," she muttered in disbelief, capturing microscopic images rapidly. But with whom or what? A sudden, chilling silence engulfed the tent. Foster looked up sharply, noticing the unusual quietness of patients who had moments ago filled the space with agonized moans and fearful whispers. She approached cautiously, heart pounding in her chest. Every patient stared silently upward, their eyes glazed and unfocused yet eerily synchronized in their movements. Simultaneously, their lips moved, forming words barely audible yet deeply unsettling. "We are coming. You cannot stop us." The chorus echoed softly but clearly, chilling Foster to her core. She stumbled backward, the realization hitting her with terrifying force. The pathogen wasn't merely biological, it was sentient, purposeful, and hostile. Outside, Reed received frantic communications from across the quarantined hospital, describing identical incidents. Patients and medical staff alike now uttered synchronized messages, speaking as if possessed by a single, unified consciousness. Reed exchanged a grim glance with Dr. Greer, whose pallid expression mirrored his own deep dread. "Whatever it is," Greer said quietly, his voice wavering with shock and "it's not just infecting us, it's claiming us." And as Red watched helplessly, he knew their battle had entered a terrifying new stage, one where humanity itself might be the final casualty. The frenzied chaos outside continued unabated, each passing moment eroding what little control remained. Foster and Reed exchanged urgent glances, silently acknowledging the severity of their situation. They needed a breakthrough, and they needed it immediately. Marcus, we must isolate a patient, Foster said firmly, attempting to regain her composure. We need to study the progression meticulously, in isolation, to determine exactly how this entity operates. Reed nodded, understanding the grim necessity of her request. He motioned to several security personnel, directing them toward Patricia, whose symptoms had escalated alarmingly. Patricia thrashed violently as they approached, her eyes wild, her voice distorted as she spoke in languages she shouldn't have known. Careful, Foster warned urgently, her voice tight with anxiety. We must ensure she's contained safely. With great difficulty, they managed to transport Patricia into a secured isolation unit. Foster immediately began detailed observations, taking exhaustive notes and recording every symptom and reaction meticulously. Patricia's condition rapidly deteriorated, her cries becoming increasingly erratic and disturbing. "They're coming!" Patricia screamed suddenly, eyes wide with terror, fingers clawing desperately at unseen attackers. "They will consume us all." Foster struggled to remain detached, her heart pounding in her chest. The implications of Patricia's words were too terrifying to dismiss. The pathogen was not merely infecting, it appeared to be consciously attacking, communicating, and perhaps even strategizing. As hours passed, Patricia's condition stabilized briefly, offering a fleeting moment of lucidity. Foster approached cautiously, hoping desperately for answers. "Patricia, can you hear me?" Foster asked softly. Patricia turned slowly, her gaze unnervingly calm yet piercingly intense. "Elaine," she whispered, her voice tremulous yet coherent, "this isn't a disease. It's something ancient, something awakened. And it's using us to come back." The words chilled Foster to her very core, forcing her to confront a terrifying reality, one where humanity might be the vehicle for something far darker and older than she had ever imagined. Foster stepped back slowly, her mind racing with dread. The intensity in Patricia's eyes left no doubt of the sincerity behind her terrifying revelation. Patricia's breathing grew shallow again, her brief lucidity fading back into delirium. Foster stood helplessly, haunted by Patricia's warning and the profound implications it carried. Meanwhile, Agent Reed monitored escalating reports across the quarantine zones. The patient's violent outbursts had become synchronized, eerily coordinated, defying rational explanation. His frustration mounted as the communication channels erupted with urgent demands for guidance he felt unequipped to give. Dr. Anton Greer approached Reed quietly, his expression weary but resolved. "Agent Reed, we might need assistance from outside the traditional medical and scientific communities. If this is indeed something ancient, something paranormal, standard protocols won't suffice." Reed hesitated, grappling with disbelief and skepticism, but the overwhelming evidence left him no choice. "Who could possibly help us with something like this?" Greer glanced nervously at the chaotic scenes unfolding around them. "There's someone, a specialist in unusual phenomena, Dr. Evelyn Hart. Her methods are unconventional, but she's dealt with situations somewhat similar to this." Reed nodded grimly, feeling the weight of desperation pressing upon him. "Contact her immediately. We have no time to waste." As Greer hurried off to make the call, Reed turned back toward the perimeter barriers, witnessing the relentless assault by the infected. Their strength seemed unnatural, their determination terrifyingly single-minded. Whatever force animated them grew stronger by the moment. Inside the isolation unit, Patricia's condition deteriorated further. Her body convulsed violently, her voice now an unsettling, guttural chant. Foster quickly administered a sedative, hoping desperately to ease the nurse's torment. Yet even in unconsciousness, Patricia's lips continued to move silently, as if communicating with an unseen presence. Exhausted and deeply disturbed, Foster slumped against the wall, realizing the magnitude of what they faced. The invisible enemy wasn't merely infecting. It was possessing and reshaping humanity itself, and if they failed to stop it, there would be no going back. Foster stepped back slowly, her mind racing with dread. The intensity in Patricia's eyes left no doubt of the sincerity behind her terrifying revelation. Patricia's breathing grew shallow again, her brief lucidity fading back into delirium. Foster stood helplessly, haunted by Patricia's warning and the profound implications it carried. Meanwhile, Agent Reed monitored escalating reports across the quarantine zones. The patient's violent outbursts had become synchronized, eerily coordinated, defying rational explanation. His frustration mounted as the communication channels erupted with urgent demands for guidance he felt unequipped to give. Dr. Anton Greer approached Reed quietly, his expression weary but resolved. "Agent Reed, we might need assistance from outside the traditional medical and scientific communities. If this is indeed something ancient, something paranormal, standard protocols won't suffice." Reed hesitated, grappling with disbelief and skepticism, but the overwhelming evidence left him no choice. Who could possibly help us with something like this? Greer glanced nervously at the chaotic scenes unfolding around them. "There's someone a specialist in unusual phenomena, Dr. Evelyn Hart. Her methods are unconventional, but she's dealt with situations somewhat similar to this." Reed nodded grimly, feeling the weight of desperation pressing upon him. "Contact her immediately. We have no time to waste." As Greer hurried off to make the call, Reed turned back toward the perimeter barriers, witnessing the relentless assault by the infected. Their strength seemed unnatural, their determination terrifyingly single-minded. Whatever force animated them grew stronger by the moment. Inside the isolation unit, Patricia's condition deteriorated further. Her body convulsed violently, her voice now an unsettling, guttural chant. Foster quickly administered a sedative, hoping desperately to ease the nurse's torment. Yet even in unconsciousness, Patricia's lips continued to move silently, as if communicating with an unseen presence. Exhausted and deeply disturbed, Foster slumped against the wall, realizing the magnitude of what they faced. The invisible enemy wasn't merely infecting. It was possessing and reshaping humanity itself, and if they failed to stop it, there would be no going back. Chapter 5. Hidden Secrets. As night fell once again over the beleaguered Riverside General Hospital, a new figure arrived amidst the chaos, her presence both enigmatic and unsettling. Dr. Evelyn Hart, renowned for her controversial methods and expertise in unexplained phenomena, stepped through the quarantine barriers with an air of calm determination. Her eyes scanned the encampment methodically, noting every detail with practiced precision. Agent Reed greeted her, his exhaustion evident yet his relief palpable. "Dr. Hart, thank you for coming on such short notice." She offered a brief nod, her expression unreadable. "Tell me everything, leave nothing out, no matter how insignificant it might seem." Reed escorted Hart to a secure briefing area, summarizing the chilling sequence of events from Gloria Ramirez's admission to the rapid, catastrophic spread of the mysterious condition. He detailed the bizarre symptoms, the synchronized patient behaviors, and the inexplicable cellular phenomena observed by Dr. Foster. Hart listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. Her silence was punctuated by thoughtful hums, each carrying a weight of contemplation. "Show me the patient 0, Gloria Ramirez," she finally requested, her tone firm yet quietly commanding. Reed and Hart approached the secured area where Gloria's body was carefully isolated. Hart's gaze sharpened as she examined the body now. pale and seemingly peaceful, yet undeniably disturbing in its stillness. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned closer, inspecting the faintly luminescent substance that still clung subtly to Gloria's skin. Has anyone investigated Gloria's background thoroughly? Hart asked abruptly, her eyes never leaving the body. Reed hesitated, then shook his head slowly. We've been so preoccupied containing this infection. Her history hasn't been fully explored. Then that's our next step, Hart said decisively. We need to understand who Gloria Ramirez truly was, everything about her past, her habits, her connections. The answer might lie there. Agent Reed immediately dispatched a team to investigate Gloria's history, gathering every shred of available information. Hours passed, tension mounting as they awaited results. Eventually, detailed reports began to emerge, and what they revealed deepened the enigma further. Gloria Ramirez had lived quietly, but beneath the surface, hidden secrets began to unravel. A series of strange illnesses in her immediate family, unexplained disappearances in her circle of friends, and whispered stories from neighbors about odd rituals performed late at night. Dr. Hart absorbed the information, her expression becoming increasingly grave. This isn't simply biological or even paranormal, it's intentional, she murmured softly, her voice barely audible. Gloria was the vessel. Someone or something used her deliberately. Reed stared at Hart, comprehension dawning with chilling clarity. You think someone set this in motion? But who or what would do something like this? Hart met his gaze steadily, her voice dropping to a whisper filled with dread. That's exactly what we need to find out, and quickly, because whatever has been unleashed, it's still gathering strength, preparing for something far worse. The realization hung heavily between them, a dark promise of deeper horrors yet to be uncovered. Dr. Hart quickly coordinated with Reed, assembling a comprehensive, investigative team that included both forensic experts and specialized researchers. They meticulously dissected every available aspect of Gloria Ramirez's past, her medical history, financial records, and social interactions, leaving no detail overlooked. As the hours passed, patterns began to surface that chilled them too. The core, Gloria had exhibited a persistent fascination with obscure medical phenomena and rare diseases. Her home was filled with journals and notes, many scribbled frantically in margins, cryptic references to obscure medical texts and forgotten folklore. One investigator uncovered hidden compartments within her home, revealing artifacts that defied conventional explanation: ancient vials filled with substances that glowed faintly in the darkness, books with pages brittle and yellowed by time, depicting rituals and diagrams unsettlingly similar to the biological anomalies observed in Gloria's body. Agent Reed and Dr. Hart examined these artifacts closely, their unease deepening with each discovery. Hart gently turned the pages of one particularly disturbing text, her eyes narrowing with recognition and concern. She whispered, pointing to a symbol etched intricately within the pages. Is an ancient sigil used in rites intended to bridge worlds. It implies something beyond mere biological manipulation. It's an attempt at summoning. Reed swallowed hard, feeling his pulse quicken. Summoning what exactly? Entities not meant for our realm, Hart replied gravely, her voice tinged with fear and reverence. If Gloria Ramirez was indeed used as a vessel, then the contamination we're facing isn't just biological or paranormal, it's an invasion. The weight of Hart's words settled heavily upon them both, punctuated by the stark silence of the investigative room. Each artifact, each note, underscored a terrifying truth. What had begun with Gloria Ramirez might be merely the first step towards something far more catastrophic. Agent Reed felt the urgency rise within him as he turned to Hart, his expression tense and resolute. We need to understand exactly who might have orchestrated this. Could Gloria have been working alone, or was she part of a larger group? Hart's eyes flickered thoughtfully, her fingers tracing gently over the weathered pages of the ancient text. This level of complexity and sophistication points to more than a single individual's efforts, she said cautiously. Gloria may have been manipulated, convinced, or coerced. We must identify who influenced her, and for what purpose. The investigative team expanded their search further, cross-referencing Gloria's connections with historical records, local groups, and organizations known for dabbling in occult or esoteric activities. Hours blurred together in relentless pursuit, each new lead sending chills deeper into their spines. One particular name surfaced repeatedly in their inquiries, a shadowy figure named Samuel Kettering. Kettering had a reputation shrouded in mystery and speculation, linked loosely to various unexplained incidents and disappearances in the region over the past 2 decades. Hart and Reed studied Kettering's file carefully, noting the sparse but troubling details. He had vanished without a trace several years ago, yet whispers suggested he remained active, pulling strings from behind a carefully constructed facade of normality. Find Kettering, Reed instructed sharply, urgency thickening his voice. Whatever it takes, track him down. He may hold the key to understanding exactly what's happening here. Hart nodded in agreement, her expression grim, and we must hurry. Time is no longer on our side. The entity we face grows stronger with each passing moment. With renewed urgency, the investigative team doubled their efforts. Information trickled in slowly, but each piece contributed to a more disturbing portrait of Samuel Kettering. Known to a select few as a reclusive but charismatic figure, Kettering had cultivated a small following obsessed with merging ancient mysticism with modern science. His followers, often young professionals drawn from medical and scientific fields, disappeared frequently into secretive gatherings that neighbors described as unsettling and cult-like. Late that night, as Hart examined the gathered intel, a realization struck her like lightning. Agent Reed, look at this, she said urgently, handing him a photograph. In the grainy image, Kettering stood near a laboratory setting, holding a vial whose faint glow mirrored the substance found on Gloria Ramirez's body. This can't be a coincidence, Reed muttered, the implications flooding him with dread. We need to locate that lab immediately. A rapid investigation pinpointed a secluded facility on the outskirts of Riverside, an abandoned pharmaceutical research center that Kettering had secretly acquired years prior. Without hesitation, Red assembled a specialized containment team to infiltrate and secure the facility. Upon arrival, the team discovered the doors slightly ajar, as if someone had left in haste. Inside, the dimly lit corridors were littered with equipment and hastily abandoned notes. At the heart of the lab, a large containment chamber sat ominously empty, its inner walls covered in strange, glowing residues similar to those found on Gloria. Hart examined the chamber closely, her voice trembling slightly. This was their focal point, where they tried to bridge the worlds. They succeeded but clearly lost control. Reed stared grimly at the empty chamber, comprehending the scale of their crisis. Then the question now is, what exactly have they unleashed, and how do we stop it before it's too late? Dr. Hart quickly moved to inspect the scattered notes and documents, her eyes scanning rapidly over hastily scribbled lines and cryptic diagrams. These notes reference a final stage, she said urgently, her voice filled with foreboding. They mention something called the convergence. Reed leaned in closely, trying to decipher the hurried handwriting. What does it mean? Hart's expression darkened considerably. It's an event, a culmination of whatever they've summoned, where the entity fully manifests in our realm through its chosen hosts. They didn't lose control accidentally. This was intentional. They meant for it to escape. A chill ran through Reed as he absorbed her words. Can we stop it? Hart hesitated only briefly. her determination overriding her visible fear. We must find Samuel Kettering immediately. If he initiated this, he may be the only one who knows how to reverse it. At that moment, Reed's radio crackled to life urgently. Agent Reed, we've located Kettering's last known whereabouts. Sending coordinates now. Without wasting another second, Reed rallied his team. Let's move. Every moment counts. As they rushed from the ominous laboratory, Hart paused briefly, casting one final glance at the glowing residue on the containment chamber walls. We're racing against something beyond our understanding, she murmured, her voice barely audible even to herself. And if we fail, humanity may never recover. Chapter 6. The Laboratory of Fear. Agent Reed, Dr. Hart, and their assembled team approached the coordinates swiftly, an abandoned industrial complex isolated in the outskirts of the city. The area was eerily silent, save for the distant, unsettling sound of wind whistling through rusted metal structures. Shadows stretched long beneath the pale glow of emergency lights, lending an atmosphere of haunting abandonment. As they cautiously entered the main building, flashlights pierced the oppressive darkness, revealing corridors lined with forgotten equipment and walls stained by neglect and decay. The silence seemed to press upon them, heavy and watchful. Stay alert, Reed instructed softly, his voice tense. We have no idea what we're walking into, Doctor. Hart moved carefully ahead, her keen eyes inspecting every detail. She paused, signaling to the team. Ahead lay a heavy steel door, slightly ajar, an unnatural chill emanating from within. This must be it, she whispered, pushing the door open wider. Inside, they found a laboratory vastly different from the disarray they'd previously encountered. Everything was immaculately arranged, sterile and precise. At the center stood an elaborate apparatus, tubes and wires spiraling outward, connected to monitors displaying incomprehensible data. At the heart of this strange device sat a large, glass-encased chamber, empty yet pulsing gently with a faint, rhythmic glow. They've created something extraordinary, Hart murmured, her voice awed yet deeply troubled. A machine designed specifically to open a gateway. Suddenly, the monitors flickered violently, displaying rapidly shifting images and symbols. From hidden speakers, a voice emerged, distorted, yet undeniably human. Welcome, it echoed chillingly. I've been expecting you. Kettering, Reed growled, eyes scanning the shadows. Show yourself. From the far end of the room stepped Samuel Kettering, his figure gaunt and shadowed, yet radiating a sinister calm. His gaze locked onto theirs, his smile unsettling. You're too late, Kettering declared softly, almost sympathetically. The convergence has already begun. Reed raised his weapon cautiously, never breaking eye contact with Kettering. Whatever you've done, Kettering, you have to stop it now. Kettering's smile widened, his expression cold and detached. You misunderstand entirely, Agent Reed. This is not something I can stop, nor would I, even if I could. Hart stepped forward, her voice firm yet edged with desperation. Why are you doing this? Do you realize the devastation you've unleashed? Kettering tilted his head thoughtfully, eyes glittering with eerie fascination. Devastation? No evolution, Dr. Hart. Humanity has reached its limits. Through the convergence, we will transcend. Reed tightened his grip on the firearm, frustration seeping through his voice. Enough with the cryptic nonsense. Tell us how to shut this down. Kettering chuckled softly, shaking his head. You can't shut it down. The entity is already here, awakening within its chosen vessels. Gloria Ramirez was merely the beginning. Then help us reverse it. Hart pleaded urgently, stepping closer. Surely you can see this isn't evolution, it's annihilation. Kettering regarded her with unsettling calm, then gestured toward the pulsing chamber behind him. Step inside, Dr. See for yourself the future I've helped create. Hart hesitated briefly, dread pooling within her, but her determination overrode her. Fear. She moved closer, peering through the chamber's glass walls. What she saw inside made her blood run cold. An ethereal, shifting form, both mesmerizing and terrifying, hovering in an impossible state between reality and nightmare. Kettering's voice echoed behind her, softly triumphant. Beautiful, isn't it? Soon, all humanity will share in this glory. Hart spun around, eyes wide with horror. This isn't glory, it's madness. We must stop it. Kettering merely smiled once more, his eyes alight with unsettling anticipation. Oh, but Dr. Hart, it's far too late for that now. At that moment, alarms blared violently throughout the laboratory, red lights flashing with urgent intensity. Reed glanced quickly toward the monitors, his heart racing. What's happening? He demanded sharply. Kettering laughed quietly, a sound devoid of warmth or humanity. The convergence approaches its speak. Those you thought infected they are becoming. Something far more magnificent on the screens. Chaotic scenes unfolded from surveillance feeds inside Riverside General Hospital. Patients and medical staff previously incapacitated now moved with disturbing synchronization, their motions unnatural and robotic, their expressions eerily calm yet vacant. Hart stepped back from the chamber, shaking visibly. You've turned innocent people into puppet slaves to this entity. Kettering's eyes narrowed slightly, his tone icy yet fervent. They are the chosen, Dr. Hart, harbingers of our next evolution. They will lead humanity into its glorious new form. Reed could no longer restrain his urgency. He moved swiftly, aiming his weapon directly at Kettering. Tell us how to stop it, or so help me, you'll do what? Kettering interrupted. Coldly, kill me. It won't matter. The process is irreversible. It's already beyond any control you think you possess. Suddenly, a piercing, otherworldly screech emanated from the containment chamber, shattering the uneasy silence. The entity within churned violently, its form pulsing and expanding with frightening intensity. Hart grasped Reed's arm, her voice shaking. We have to evacuate now. This place won't hold much longer. As they began their hurried retreat, Kettering's voice followed them, chilling and prophetic. You can run, but you can't hide from destiny. The convergence will find you all. Explosions echoed behind them, sending violent tremors throughout the building. The corridors shook and cracked, debris tumbling down around them as they raced. For the exit, Hart and Reed led the team, urgency etched into their faces as they dodged falling beams and rupturing pipes. Reaching the outside, they barely cleared the entrance before another deafening blast tore through the structure. The laboratory erupted in a fiery inferno, flames roaring skyward, illuminating the night sky in a ghastly orange glow. Reed spun around, breathing heavily, his eyes wide with disbelief and shock. Did we stop it? He gasped, staring at the inferno. Consuming the lab, Hart shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on the flames, haunted and deeply troubled. I fear we've only delayed it. As the team regrouped, an urgent transmission crackled through Reed's radio. Agent Reed, we're losing control. At Riverside General. Patients are escaping quarantine, the infected are moving as one, and we can't stop them. Hart's breath caught sharply, her voice dropping to a whisper filled with dread. The convergence isn't contained, it's spreading. Reed's jaw tightened, determination overtaking his exhaustion. Then our fight isn't over. We need to get back. To Riverside General immediately. They piled into their vehicles, tires screeching as they raced back toward the hospital, hearts pounding with desperate urgency. The city lights blurred past, each second drawing them closer to a confrontation they feared they were already too late to prevent. The convergence had begun, and the world hung precariously on the brink of an unimaginable nightmare. As they approached Riverside General Hospital, chaos was evident from blocks away. Flashing emergency lights cast unsettling patterns against buildings, and panicked radio chatter filled their ears with reports of escalating violence and bizarre behaviors among the infected. Pulling into the hospital's vicinity, Reed and Hart saw firsthand the extent of the nightmare. Infected individuals moved with eerie uniformity, their vacant expressions chillingly emotionless as they surged toward hastily erected barriers or coming security personnel with unnatural strength and precision. It's like they're being controlled. Hart murmured in shock, "They're no longer themselves." Reed nodded grimly, gripping his weapon tighter. "We need to find a way to disrupt whatever's controlling them quickly." The team swiftly regrouped near a hastily established command post. Medical staff and security personnel exchanged desperate, confused glances, clearly overwhelmed by the rapidly deteriorating situation. A young medic approached urgently. "Dr. Hart, we've observed strange electromagnetic fluctuations coinciding with the infected patient's movements. Could that be related?" Hart considered this quickly, realization dawning in her eyes. Of course, the gateway, the convergence is likely electromagnetic in nature. If we disrupt the signal, we might break their control. Reed immediately turned to the technician at the command post. "Do you have any EMP devices or similar technology?" The technician nodded quickly. "Limited range, but yes, if we strategically position them, we could potentially disrupt the signal hospital-wide." "Then let's move," Reed ordered decisively. "We don't have much time." The team mobilized swiftly. Each member acutely aware that failure now meant losing far more than just one hospital, it meant losing humanity itself. Chapter 7. Voices in the shadows. Amidst the chaotic cacophony of alarms and panicked voices at Riverside General Hospital, Agent Reed, Dr. Hart, and their assembled team moved swiftly and methodically. The darkness felt almost tangible, oppressive as it pressed in from every shadowed corner, making each step more difficult than the last. "Position the EMP devices at strategic points throughout the facility," Reed commanded urgently, pointing toward corridors and junctions marked hastily on a makeshift map. Coordinate activation timing must be precise. Dr. Hart moved alongside the team, providing guidance based on her understanding of the convergence and its electromagnetic nature. Yet, as she traversed the hospital's eerily silent corridors, an unsettling sensation began to creep over her. Whispers, faint and insidious, brushed against her consciousness. "Can anyone else hear that?" Hart asked quietly, her voice edged. With a knees, Reed glanced toward her, concerned. "Hear what?" "Voices," she replied hesitantly, her eyes darting anxiously into the shadowed recesses around them, like whispers coming from everywhere and nowhere. The team members exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they weren't immune to this eerie phenomenon either. The whispers grew louder, clearer, an indistinct chorus of unsettling murmurs, permeating the atmosphere. "You're not alone," the whispers echoed gently, insidiously comforting yet deeply menacing. "We have always been here. Join us." Hart shuddered, her breath quickening as a sudden realization struck her. "They're trying to influence us, attempting to pull us into the convergence." Reed's jaw tightened with resolve. "Ignore them," he commanded firmly, his voice grounding the team amidst the disorienting whispers. "Stay focused on the mission." Yet, as they pressed deeper into the heart of the compromised hospital, the shadows seemed to close in tighter, and the voices grew stronger, more insistent. Their resolve was tested with every step, each whisper drawing them closer to a precipice of madness from which they might never return. Chapter 7. Voices in the shadows. Amidst the chaotic cacophony of alarms and panicked voices at Riverside General, Hospital, Agent Reed, Dr. Hart, and their assembled team moved swiftly and methodically. The darkness felt almost tangible, oppressive as it pressed in from every shadowed corner, making each step more difficult than the last. Position the EMP devices at strategic points throughout the facility, Reed commanded urgently, pointing toward corridors and junctions marked hastily on a makeshift map. Coordinate activation timing must be precise. Dr. Hart moved alongside the team, providing guidance based on her understanding of the convergence and its electromagnetic nature. Yet, as she traversed the hospital's eerily silent corridors, an unsettling sensation began to creep over her. Whispers, faint and insidious, brushed against her consciousness. "Can anyone else hear that?" Hart asked quietly, her voice edged with unease. Reed glanced toward her, concerned. "Hear what?" "Voices," she replied hesitantly, her eyes darting anxiously into the shadowed recesses around them, like whispers coming from everywhere and nowhere. The team members exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they weren't immune to this eerie phenomenon either. The whispers grew louder, clearer, an indistinct chorus of unsettling murmurs, permeating the atmosphere. "You're not alone," the whispers echoed gently, insidiously comforting yet deeply menacing. "We have always been here. Join us." Hart shuddered, her breath quickening as a sudden realization struck her. "They're trying to influence us, attempting to pull us into the convergence." Reed's jaw tightened with resolve. "Ignore them," he commanded firmly, his voice grounding the team amidst the disorienting whispers. "Stay focused on the mission." Yet, as they pressed deeper into the heart of the compromised hospital, the shadows seemed to close in tighter, and the voices grew stronger, more insistent. Their resolve was tested with every step, each whisper drawing them closer to a precipice of madness from which they might never return. Hart fought desperately against the growing influence of the voices, clinging tightly to her sanity. She knew instinctively that if she yielded, even momentarily, she risked being drawn irrevocably into the entity's grasp. "Stay sharp," she urged, forcing strength into her voice despite the turmoil within. "They're trying to weaken our minds, separate us, and break our resolve." Reed's gaze swept over the team, noting their increasingly distressed expressions. "Pair up," he commanded sharply. "Maintain visual contact at all times. If anyone feels overwhelmed, alert your partner immediately." As the team quickly reorganized, forming tight pairs to bolster their mental defenses, the whispers intensified, now accompanied by fleeting visual hallucinations. Shadows flickered unnaturally at the corners of their vision, dark figures lurking just beyond the reach of their lights. A technician suddenly cried out in panic, stumbling back against the wall, eyes wide with terror. Here I see them." Hart swiftly moved to his side, gripping his shoulder firmly. "Look at me," she commanded forcefully, compelling him to meet her steady gaze. "Focus on my voice, nothing else. They can't harm us unless we let them in." The technician nodded shakily, drawing a deep, trembling breath as he fought to regain control. Hart turned to Reed, urgency etched deeply into her features. "We have to activate the EMP devices now. The longer we delay, the stronger their hold becomes." Reed signaled to the team urgently, voice steady and authoritative. "Positions. Everyone activate on my mark." They hurriedly dispersed, each pair moving swiftly yet cautiously through the shadow-infested corridors. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon them all, knowing the success or failure of their desperate mission would determine humanity's fate. Each step closer to their designated points was a struggle, the oppressive force around them thickening as if resisting their efforts. Hart and Reed led separate teams, each navigating toward critical positions within the labyrinthine corridors. Reed's voice broke through their communication devices, steady yet edged with urgency. ready devices, activation in 5, 4, 3. Suddenly, an overwhelming wave of pressure surged through the corridors, knocking several team members off balance. Lights flickered erratically, plunging them momentarily into pitch darkness. Panic surged, voices rising in alarm as team members scrambled to regain their footing. Hart quickly steadied herself, gripping tightly to a nearby railing. "Hold your positions," she commanded, her voice firm despite her racing heart. "We must activate simultaneously, or it won't be effective." In the disorienting darkness, whispers intensified into audible, taunting laughter, mocking their efforts and filling their minds with dread. Reed forced himself upright, fighting against the oppressive energy. 2, 1 activate now. He shouted into his device. Simultaneously, each pair triggered their devices. A powerful electromagnetic pulse surged through the building, momentarily silencing the whispers and plunging the corridors into a stunned stillness. The team members glanced around cautiously, their breaths held in tense anticipation. For a brief moment, an eerie calm settled over the hospital, hope flickering faintly amidst the lingering shadows. But Hart's heart sank as she realized the silence was not victory, it was merely the quiet before a new, more terrifying storm. Suddenly, the whispers returned with renewed ferocity, sharper and more invasive than before. They sliced into the team's minds like icy blades, sowing confusion and despair. Team members grasped their heads in agony, fighting desperately against the overwhelming intrusion. "We underestimated their resilience," Hart gasped, her voice strained with pain as she struggled to maintain focus. Reed, clenching his fists in frustration, swiftly assessed the dire situation. "Fall back to the main atrium. Regroup and maintain defensive positions." The team moved hastily, stumbling through the shadow-cloaked corridors back to the central atrium. As they regrouped, the atmosphere thickened ominously, an oppressive presence manifesting palpably around them. The darkness shifted, solidifying into ethereal forms, shadowy figures with hollow eyes and twisted, ghostly visages. They moved slowly toward the team, emitting a low, haunting moan that resonated through the air. Hart stepped forward, confronting the encroaching entities with steely determination. "Don't give in. They feed on fear and despair. Hold your ground." The team rallied around her words, drawing strength from her resolve. They stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the approaching shadows, hearts pounding with a mix of terror and defiant courage. This battle was no longer merely physical, it was a struggle for their very souls. "Remember who you are," Hart called out, her voice ringing clear amidst the rising chaos. "These entities prey on doubt and fear. Do not give them that power." As if responding to her defiance, the shadowy figures surged forward aggressively, their ethereal forms becoming more defined, expressions twisted into visages of hatred and hunger. Their ghastly moans transformed into chilling screams, reverberating painfully through the hospital's hallways. "Stay strong," Reed shouted, stepping beside Hart with unwavering determination. He aimed his weapon at the nearest entity, though, unsure if conventional weaponry could harm such apparitions. To his astonishment, when he fired, the entity recoiled, its form flickering erratically. Encouraged, the rest of the team joined Reed, their weapons discharging into the encroaching darkness. Each shot seemed to disrupt the entities momentarily, causing them to waver and retreat slightly. "They can be affected," Reed yelled, emboldening the team. "Keep fighting." As the team fought desperately against the otherworldly onslaught, Hart realized something vital. She reached into her bag and retrieved the ancient text she had found at Kettering's lab. Frantically flipping through its brittle pages, she sought the symbols she had previously seen. Her eyes widened in recognition as she found the incantation she needed. Taking a deep breath, she began reciting the words aloud, her voice steady despite the turmoil surrounding her. As each syllable left her lips, the shadows shrieked and recoiled, their forms destabilizing. "It's working!" Reed shouted, covering her as she continued her chant. "Keep going." Hart's voice grew stronger, filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness around them began to fracture, and the oppressive whispers diminished, retreating into anguished silence. Seeing Hart's incantation take effect, the team redoubled their efforts, pushing back against the shadowy entities with newfound determination. The shadow forms wavered and twisted, their ghostly screams rising in frustration as they desperately clung to their hold on this world. "Maintain your focus," Hart urged loudly, her voice clear and powerful. She continued the chant, the ancient words resonating with undeniable authority through the atrium. Each syllable seemed to unravel the sinister grip of the entities further, diminishing their power visibly. Suddenly, a fierce backlash of energy surged toward Hart, knocking her momentarily off balance. Reed quickly steadied her, offering silent encouragement through his steady gaze. Drawing strength from his support, she resumed the incantation with even greater resolve. With a final, resounding word, the shadows shrieked in unison, their forms dissolving violently into smoke like tendrils before vanishing completely into the void from which they'd emerged. The oppressive atmosphere lifted abruptly, replaced by a profound, exhausted silence. Team members glanced around cautiously, disbelief and relief mingling in their expressions. Reed surveyed the area, breath heavy yet controlled. "Is it over?" he questioned, wary yet hopeful. Hart met his gaze, weary but resolute. "For now," she answered softly, "but we must remain vigilant. This was merely one battle, the war is far from over." Seeing the shadows recede, the team regained their confidence, rallying around Hart and Red with renewed determination. The oppressive weight that had threatened to crush their spirits began to lift, replaced by cautious optimism. Hart finished the incantation, her voice resonating with a powerful finality. The last echoes faded into silence, and for the first time, the hospital felt free of malevolent influence. Reed surveyed the team carefully, ensuring everyone was accounted for and unharmed. "We've bought ourselves some time," Reed announced firmly, addressing the team, "but we can't afford to become complacent. Secure the area and assist anyone who might still need help." Hart moved beside Reed, her face pale but resolute. "This was only a temporary reprieve. To end this permanently, we must confront and close the source of the convergence." Reed met her gaze, acknowledging the gravity of her words. "Then that's our next move." As the team worked swiftly to secure the atrium, Hart's thoughts raced, knowing the hardest battle still lay ahead. Their fight was far from over, and the true source of darkness remained hidden, waiting to be confronted. Exhausted yet resolute, Reed and Hart quickly formulated their next steps. Hart gently closed the ancient text, feeling its weight both literally and figuratively, a reminder of the dangerous knowledge she now wielded. "We need to pinpoint the exact location of the convergence," Hart said quietly, addressing Reed directly. "It's not enough to push them back. We must seal whatever breach has allowed them entry." Reed nodded in agreement, his expression grim but focused. "Then we start with what we know, the original source, the laboratory where Kettering initiated this nightmare." Hart took a deep breath, steeling herself for the daunting task ahead. "Agreed. If the convergence began there, the key to ending it permanently must lie there as well." With renewed purpose, they relayed their plans to the team. The atrium bustled with preparations, the urgency of their mission clear. Everyone knew the stakes. understood the gravity of what was required. As Reed and Hart stood side by side, readying themselves for what awaited them, an unspoken resolve passed between them. This battle had tested their courage and their sanity, yet the final confrontation still loomed ominously ahead. Stepping forward together, the team moved purposefully toward the hospital exit, knowing their ultimate test and perhaps humanity's final stand awaited them. Chapter 8: The Unseen Terror. Agent Reed, Dr. Hart, and their determined team emerged cautiously from Riverside General Hospital, stepping into an unsettlingly quiet night. The air felt thick, charged with an eerie stillness that sent shivers down their spines. Every shadow seemed to watch them, each gust of wind carrying faint echoes of the sinister whispers they'd battled moments ago. "Stay alert," Reed instructed, quietly, scanning their surroundings warily. "We don't know what awaits us." Their vehicles, parked haphazardly in the chaotic rush earlier, lay waiting silently ahead, engines cold. As the team quickly loaded equipment and checked gear, Hart felt an unsettling pressure build once again, subtle but undeniable, like eyes unseen scrutinizing her every move. "The closer we get to the source, the stronger its presence becomes," she murmured to Reed, her voice tight with tension. He nodded grimly, understanding the gravity of her words. "Then we're on the right track." The journey back to the abandoned laboratory was filled with tense silence, broken only by intermittent radio checks and terse instructions. As they neared their destination, the atmosphere intensified further, the landscape around them appearing subtly distorted, reality itself seemingly compromised. Finally arriving at the now ruined laboratory, its skeletal remains looming ominously. Under pale moonlight, Red and Hart stepped out, immediately sensing the epicenter of the convergence. "This is it," Hart declared solemnly, steeling herself against the oppressive force that threatened to engulf her mind. "We must close the gateway, whatever the cost." Determined and resolute, the team advanced slowly toward the heart of the shattered building, each step bringing them closer to confronting the unseen terror that awaited them. Inside the gutted remains of the laboratory, every movement felt sluggish and strained, as though the very air resisted their presence. Charred debris crunched underfoot, and faint, unnatural whispers rose and fell, just beyond their hearing, teasing at the edge of consciousness. Hart guided the team toward the central chamber where they'd first encountered Kettering. The remnants of his ominous machinery stood like twisted sculptures, their metallic frames warped and blackened from the earlier explosions. "We need to recreate the disruption," Hart said decisively, analyzing the damage carefully. "The EMP blast weakened them temporarily. If we can amplify and channel a similar disruption directly through the gateway, we might seal it permanently." Reed nodded in understanding, directing the team to assemble the necessary equipment from their supplies. "Let's move quickly," he urged. "We don't know how much time we have before they're strong enough to counterattack." As the team worked feverishly to set up the equipment, Hart studied the ancient text once more, seeking any additional insight or ritual that might strengthen their chances. Her heart raced as she found a passage, previously overlooked, describing a ritual that could permanently sever the connection between their world and the other. "Marcus," Hart called urgently, motioning Reed over to view the passage. "This might be our best hope, but it requires someone to physically perform the ritual at the threshold." Reed looked solemnly at Hart, realization dawning in his eyes. "That means someone will have to cross the gateway, possibly without a way back." Hart met his gaze firmly, determination unwavering in her voice. "If that's what it takes, I'm ready." Reed's eyes flashed with a mixture of concern and admiration. "No, we do this together. We've come too far to lose anyone now." Hart hesitated briefly, sensing the deep resolve in Reed's voice. She nodded slowly, acknowledging their mutual commitment. "Then let's prepare the ritual together." As they swiftly assembled the necessary components and arranged them precisely according to the ancient text, the oppressive force around them intensified further, pressing heavily upon their spirits. The shadows twisted and pulsed, seeming to sense the imminent threat to their dominion. "It's responding," Hart whispered urgently, her voice barely audible over the rising, ethereal murmurs. "It knows we're close." Reed positioned himself protectively beside Hart, weapon at the ready, as the rest of the team secured the perimeter. "We must act now," he declared firmly, bracing himself against the building dread that clawed at his resolve. Hart began reciting the ritual, her voice strong yet carefully controlled, each word reverberating with power and intent. As she spoke, the very air trembled, the whispers swelling into anguished cries. The gateway, previously invisible, now flickered into distorted view, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness and chaotic energy. The ritual reached its climax, and Hart extended her hand toward the gateway, prepared to step forward. Reed grasped her arm, his voice resolute. Together, he affirmed steadfastly. Side by side, they approached the threshold, the fate of their world hanging in the balance. The swirling vortex roared louder, its chaotic energy intensifying, tugging at their clothes and threatening to pull them inward. Hart and Reed struggled forward, each step requiring monumental effort, as though walking against a hurricane. "Focus on the words," Hart shouted over the deafening noise, gripping Reed's hand tightly. "The incantation is our anchor, it's the only way to resist." Together, they recited the ritual with unwavering determination, their combined voices resonating with a power neither could achieve alone. The vortex reacted violently, twisting and writhing, seemingly fighting back against their intrusion. Suddenly, an immense force surged outward from the gateway, knocking them both to their knees. Reed gritted his teeth, pulling Hart back to her feet, his voice raw but steady. "We can't stop now. Finish it." Drawing upon every reserve of strength, Hart resumed chanting, her voice firm and defiant. The vortex pulsed erratically, its form beginning to fracture, cracks of brilliant white light breaking through the darkness. Reality itself seemed to ripple around them, the boundaries between worlds becoming dangerously unstable. In one final surge of energy, Hart and Reed shouted the final words of the incantation, their voices mingling in perfect harmony. A blinding flash enveloped the chamber, consuming the vortex in a burst of searing light. As silence abruptly reclaimed the chamber, Hart and Reed stood side by side, hearts pounding, senses overwhelmed yet hopeful. The gateway had vanished, leaving behind only silence and the lingering question of whether their desperate gamble had succeeded. As the dust settled, the eerie silence persisted, heavy and uncertain. Hart glanced around carefully, her heart still racing from the intense surge of energy they'd unleashed. "Did it work?" Reed asked quietly, his voice echoing softly through the now empty chamber. Before Hart could answer, a low, guttural growl resonated from deep within the shadows, chilling them to their core. Both turned swiftly, bracing themselves for whatever remained hidden in the darkness. Slowly, from the shadows emerged a spectral form. Samuel Kettering, his features twisted and translucent, eyes glowing with malevolent fury. "You cannot defeat what you've invited," he hissed, voice distorted and otherworldly. "This world is already ours." Reed raised his weapon instinctively, but Hart placed a steadying hand on his arm. "He's just a fragment," she said firmly, her voice unwavering, a remnant echo. Kettering's apparition sneered contemptuously. "Your ritual may have closed the gateway temporarily, but the barrier between our worlds is forever weakened." Hart stepped forward resolutely, facing the spectral figure head-on. "Then we'll remain vigilant. We'll be ready to face you again and again if needed." Kettering's figure flickered erratically, a grimace of frustration distorting his ghostly visage. "We shall see," he snarled, his form dissolving into fading tendrils of shadow. As the apparition disappeared completely, Hart and Reed exchanged a long, weary glance, fully aware their battle was far from finished. Yet, in this quiet moment of victory, a glimmer of hope emerged, offering them a chance to prepare for whatever unseen terrors might come next. As the silence stretched on, the team slowly gathered around Hart and Reed, their faces reflecting exhaustion mixed with cautious optimism. Reed finally broke the silence, his voice steady but wary. "We need confirmation. Check all monitors and scanning devices immediately." Technicians swiftly sprang into action, analyzing the instruments carefully. Moments passed in anxious silence, tension palpable as the team awaited the verdict. A technician glanced up, relief evident on her face. "No abnormal readings detected. Electromagnetic signatures have stabilized completely. The gateway appears fully sealed." A collective sigh of relief swept through the group. Hart and Reed exchanged a meaningful glance, relief tempered by a shared understanding that vigilance would remain necessary. Reed turned to the team, his voice firm yet reassuring. "Excellent work, everyone. Secure this area thoroughly. Ensure nothing was missed." Hart stepped forward, addressing the team with gratitude. "You've all faced the unimaginable and stood firm. Today, we've earned a victory not just for ourselves, but for humanity itself." As the team moved methodically, double-checking equipment and scanning for any lingering anomalies, Hart and Reed took a quiet moment together. "We stopped it this time," Reed said quietly, his voice carrying a solemn weight. Hart nodded, her gaze determined but thoughtful. "Yes, but we must never forget this lesson. Some doors, once opened, leave scars that can never fully heal." Standing together amidst the ruins of their ordeal, they knew their victory was both real and fragile. The unseen terror might have been banished for now, but the echoes of its presence would forever remind them to remain vigilant. Slowly, the overwhelming brightness receded, allowing their vision to clear. The chamber around them appeared starkly ordinary now, its twisted metal and scorched walls a solemn reminder of the ordeal they'd endured. Reed cautiously activated his radio, his voice weary yet resolute. "All teams, report your status." A brief pause was followed by multiple confirmations, each voice tinged with relief and exhaustion. Hart breathed deeply, feeling tension gradually drain from her muscles as the reality of their victory settled over her. "We did it," she murmured, almost disbelieving her own words. Reed turned to face her, a rare smile of genuine relief softening his usually stern expression. "Yes, we did." The rest of the team began regrouping around them, sharing expressions of relief and cautious optimism. As they stepped carefully out into the early dawn light, Reed paused, taking one last glance at the ruined laboratory. "Let's make sure this place remains buried in history," he said firmly. "We owe that much to everyone who's suffered." Hart nodded solemnly, knowing the scars of this night would linger, yet hopeful they'd prevented a far darker future. As they walked away from the site together, dawn's first light gently illuminated their path forward, guiding them back toward a world forever changed, but still standing. If you found yourself captivated by this chilling story, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us uncover more mysterious and haunting tales. Together, let's continue exploring the darkest corners of reality, because sometimes truth is far stranger and scarier than fiction. Join us on this journey by subscribing now.